Hello and welcome to today's live interview. The title of today's show is CARF. It's not an event, it's a process. So we've got a representative from CARF International with us today, and we're going to be talking about, the accreditation process, what you need to know, why they do certain things they do, why they exist, why they're in the ecosystem, and how they're different from regulators and things like that. So to join us and talk with us today, we're so blessed to have him with us today, is Michael Johnson, who I'm going to let quickly introduce himself and what he does at CARF.
Thanks, Danny. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the opportunity to be able to meet with you today. Michael Johnson. I'm the Senior Managing Director of Behavioral Health with CARF. CARF is an accrediting organization that has been in existence for a number of years. I've been in this role with CARF for a little over a decade now. My responsibilities really are around business development and strategy for behavioral health for the organization, as well as the development and implementation of standards. And I'm kind of the public face, if you will, between CARF and the state regulators, payers, a variety of different stakeholders, really kind of the key systems in the behavioral health space that are really seeking to advance, the quality of care for the field. So
I love it, man. And again, this is a live interview today, so anybody who is watching this live, if you've got questions for Michael, we'll gladly field those live, and I'm sure he can take a crack at it and give you your answer. So that's one of the benefits and the reason that at Simplifyance, that's why we do this live. So take advantage of it if you'd like to. But so Michael, how'd you get to this point? How'd you get to the Senior Managing Director of Behavioral Health? Can you give us an update on sort of your journey?
Yeah, so I've been in the business, the behavioral health business, really my entire adult life. So it's been, 40 years, a little over 40 years actually, working in the behavioral health space, working in a variety of settings, working as a tech on an inpatient psych unit, working in outpatient, working in the SUD space, working in the behavioral health space, and becoming an executive and sort of being at top level, C-level leadership of a couple of different organizations. I went through my first survey with CARF in 1990, and I actually became a surveyor for CARF a few years after that, and surveyed for about 17 years, and had the opportunity to come to work for the organization that I really had a lot of passion for, and came in and have been, with it for a long time now. So we have what I think is a very important product, for the market, which is trying to, absent the sort of the noise that can happen sometimes with, say, federal dollars, that there can be political pressure that drives why we have to make certain changes. Like, we're really looking at, the evidence, looking at the feedback, looking at what's going on in the field for those opportunities to be able to advance quality and to ensure that organizations are, delivering what really is fundamentally the best possible services for the individuals that they serve, which really is the reason why we do what we do. It really isn't for any other purpose other than ensuring that the people who are receiving services and organizations that we accredit are achieving the best possible services, the best possible outcomes. And we want to be able to offer, and marshal all of the expertise that we have in our surveyor cadre to organizations to help them to be able to get that value and get better as time goes on. Because that really is what the purpose of accreditation is. It's not just simply to, mark up the things that they're doing right and doing maybe not right, if you will, but really helping them to try to improve and to enhance quality through that system over and over and over again over time.
Yeah, and I love that. And we had talked earlier, because there's organizations we've heard like JACO, CARF, and a whole, talk about the difference between sort of a regulator and an accreditor and how you differ from a lot of these regulating bodies and what they do compared to what you're really trying to do. You touched on that a second ago, but let's dive deeper into that one.
Yeah, so it's a really important distinction, because I think a lot of times people, they view accreditation as having powers that we don't have, right? We don't have any, sort of legal powers whatsoever. The only thing that we can offer is to accredit or not accredit an organization based on whether or not they're satisfying our standards. a regulator, so a state entity, for instance, that has a licensure requirement. So let's say that you're in Florida, as an example, and you have to be licensed in order to operate and to deliver substance use disorder treatment services. If you somehow are violating one of their regulations, they do have the authority to strip your license away from you, and you can't be in business anymore. The only thing we could potentially do, the only punishment or sanction that we would have would be to take away a person's accreditation or an organization's accreditation, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they can't operate. Now, there are some exceptions to that. There are some states in which if you are not accredited, you can't operate, but those are the exception and not really the rule. But ultimately, when they have that power, what those regulators and the rules that they build are designed to, I sort of think about this as a sports metaphor. You're talking about, the NBA draft just happened recently, and we talk about Victor Wembanyama's, floor and his ceiling as a potential player. We know what he is coming in, but what's he going to be, 5 years, 10 years down the road? The thing that regulators do is they set the floor. They set the floor of safety and what has to be done in order to be able to protect citizens. They are not there for the purpose of ensuring quality, because that is a market-based function, right? So either competition drives improved quality, or accreditation in the healthcare ecosystem is something that is accepted, that we need to have accreditation both to have external credibility to the marketplace, to payers, and to patients. But it also is a competitive driver too, right? If I'm an organization and there's 3 SUD organizations in my community and none of them are accredited other than me, that puts me at a competitive advantage. And so I'm going to be touting that I have this external mark of quality that comes in, and that is ensuring that we deliver good services. And I'll use that as a lever to try to improve my status in my marketplace.
Yeah, so regulators can come in, they can, you had talked about, they set the floor, right? Mm-hmm. Of safety, what you need to do to meet the bare minimum of right. Safety and doing things the right way. Like, this is what we just basically accept. If you meet this, you're okay. Whereas CARF, you guys really view yourself as a partner in improving outcomes, a partner in continuing to allow a program to evolve. You had said that, an organization that's had, CARF accreditation for 30 years is likely going to be a healthier, well-run organization than maybe somebody going through their first CARF interview. And that's because you guys are making recommendations. You're really wanting to come alongside someone and improve programs and outcomes, correct?
Yes, exactly. I mean, we take a pretty holistic view. We have a complete quality framework of the business practices as well as the clinical, services as well. And so, and that's probably where you see the biggest difference between, say, regulators and accreditors is, that a regulator is going to certainly ensure that you meet certain health and safety requirements, but they aren't going to be all that interested in what does your strategic plan look like, and are you really looking at systems of cultural competency and equity and inclusion? Are you thinking about how you are ensuring access to the broadest possible population that you wish to serve, right? So there's a lot of additional things, as well as ultimately, how successful are you at managing what happens to people? What is the outcome of care? And how are you using those results to then feed back into your internal quality systems that's going to ensure that you're getting better and driving those outcomes up higher over time? So, it is a process. No organization should expect that when an accrediting body comes in, you're going to satisfy every single standard. It's pretty difficult to be able to fully satisfy every single standard that an accrediting body would have for you, because it is designed to help you to strive towards improvement. Again, that's the contrast to regulators. You have to satisfy every single regulation when a licensing team comes in, because if not, you may not be able to be licensed. So we really hope that as the organization becomes more familiar and integrates into their culture the standards and the systems that we have asked them to implement, that it becomes second nature to them. And I've heard and talked with CEOs that have been in organizations that we're talking about, these 30-year, 4-year accredited organizations, and they tell me that like when it's time for them to have an accreditation survey, like there's not all of the chaos and the prep sometimes that happens early on, where everyone's concerned and worried because they know that they've adapted these systems and it's just the way that they do business now. Obviously, there's always going to be some opportunities for improvement, and that's where our surveyors, who are peers in the field that are coming in, they've been trained as surveyors, but they're also working in CARF accredited organizations, and they're solving some of the same problems that your organization would be every day. So they can say, hey, I've seen how this can be helpful, or I'm bringing in this example from this organization that I might have surveyed. That really is coaching them to excellence, as opposed to just looking to sort of tick off that everything is being done right. It's how can you get better? How can you ensure that whether that's a business practice or whether that's a clinical activity or whether that's more refined use of an evidence-based practice, any of those things are going to be offered to the organization. And the feedback that we get from organizations around how consultative our surveyors are is always about 95%, meaning that the organizations are saying that the surveyors were consultative and helpful in the process, which is pretty extraordinary feedback for any organization to get in the service that they're delivering to somebody.
Yeah, I mean, speaks volumes to your mission and what CARF exists for and what you want to have happen in the behavioral health field. So it's great that we have you here today. And I want to encourage, again, anyone watching live, any questions that you have, please do drop those in the comments. We'll do our best to bring them up during this live interview today. But when it comes to preparation, so today we talk about it's not an event, it's a process. And the reason we wanted to talk about that today is because it's not, I want you to talk a little bit about, the upsides of staying on top of this throughout the year, not knowing that it's coming up in 2 months. So now we need to take our clinical director off of being the clinical director, and now they need to get the books out and start getting ready for the CARF. Talk about why this really should be a process, why it needs to be a process and not just an event.
Yeah, for sure. There is, part of the way that you're describing it, there's just a genuine inefficiency to doing it that way. The systems of quality should not be disruptive. It should be integrated into the way that care is conceptualized and the business practices that happen day in and day out, right? So, organizations, just like, any project that you would be trying to undertake as an organization, you have to kind of look at what are the activities that we're going to implement, who's responsible for it, what's the timeframes that we're going to get it done. There's effort and there is thoughtfulness that would have to go into implementing all of the activities and all of the surveillance systems, for instance, that we would expect an organization to do that's reflective of quality. Many of those things they wouldn't naturally do, just left to their own devices. So there is an effort, not just to think about, and I think that unfortunately sometimes what organizations will do is they think about it through the lens of, I feel like I'm feeling under the gun, I have to be accredited. Either I've got a payer who's saying that in order to contract with me, I've got to be accredited, or my state might be dictating that I have to be accredited. And so it's kind of like having to eat your vegetables that your mama's telling you to do sometimes. It doesn't feel as good when you're having to do it than if you happen to like some vegetables, right? And so sometimes people are looking at it through the lens of, I only want to get through this survey. I want to get my accreditation that I can put on the wall so that I can get that contract so I can satisfy that regulator. But if you don't take the approach of sustainability of implementation of those activities, it's not that you would write a strategic plan for the purposes of showing a survey team that we wrote a strategic plan and then never looking at it. It really is, is it alive? Is it meaningful? Is it being updated, based on market circumstances that are happening? If you're getting feedback, let's say that the way that you are approaching your person-centered planning process is not really person-centered enough. If it's more program-focused and not individualized, how do you, drive training? How do you ensure supervision that makes that happen over time? It's, again, these are not natural things that will happen unless there's attention that's being put to them. And so if the only target is that survey each time it comes around, that we're going to do whatever we can to sort of minimally satisfy that, you could do that, but that's always going to be stressful every single time, as opposed to, we've set up a schedule where, every May is our time frame where we're really going to review and update our strategic plan. September might be the time that we're going to go through and look at our accessibility plans. December might be our technology review activities, right? So you spread it out over time, and you make that just a part of the system, and that's how you achieve, much less stressful success with this over time, as opposed to just gearing up in the last few months every single time.
Yeah, which is a stressful thing. I've seen it, we've all seen it, it's stressful, and yeah, the point is to not make it feel stress, right? And shameless plug, right?
And let me just interrupt you there, Danny, for a second, because the other thing that does, it also creates stress for your staff, and then it ultimately creates stress for your patients, because, it's like you're not, one of the things that we want to teach in the business that we're in, especially in behavioral health, is, we want to be able to teach our patients to be able to self-assess, self-monitor, and self-correct. And that's what we're asking organizations to implement for their organization. And that becomes the template for how everyone should be living, right? And so if I'm only using chaos or stress as my motivation, to implement change, that's reflective of the dysfunction of some of the people that we serve, that we are trying to help them to do better in.
Yeah, it's a direct reflection, right? And that's anything that's an inefficiency or is causing stress on your staff. You're right. Ultimately, it's going to affect your outcome. Ultimately, it's going to affect your client's experience, right? And we want a better experience. Anybody in this field, behavioral health, we're interested in helping people. We're interested in helping people get where they need to go. Sometimes we have one chance, right? Sometimes we have one chance. Sometimes you out there could be that one chance for that person that goes through this and thinks, I'll give this a try. So it's more than just being compliant. And I'm glad you brought that up. This is culturally how, we just did an interview last week with Maeve O'Neill, who's, fantastic about culture and compliance, and how compliance can have such an impact on culture and better outcomes. And so Joe, check back and watch that if you're interested in that. But very true, very good point to make, right? And again, this is the reason that Parker, the CEO at Simplifyance, created all the products that he has, right? Is he recognized that this wasn't an ecosystem. This wasn't something that people just did all the time, and he wanted to make it easy, right? Why not make it easy on yourself? Why not have a system in place that's going to have all this stuff for your surveyors, right? The people that come out, the accreditors, to give to them and say, here it all is, no stress. We hit a few buttons and we have all the information you're going to need, because you would talk to some stories about some outdated methods. Sometimes you get the big binder, right? That has all the information, or they just hand you over a thumb drive. Talk about how inefficient that can be for you and your team and your accreditors.
The one thing I wanted to comment on what you were saying is, I do think that, we're all subject to some of the same, cultural problems, right? Like the value of something like, the product that Parker has brought to market with Simplifyance is, I think a selling point to an organization might be, we can make all of this like streamlined and easy for your survey, and so it can help you to demonstrate compliance to systems when you're being surveyed. But really, the real value of this is it's for yourself, for your own organization. If it's better organized, if the information is at people's fingertips and they don't have to go searching for it, and they by default know what the right thing is to do because the systems are set up to ensure that, that's a lot better than just doing it, for our purposes. But there isn't a right way or a wrong way for any organization to approach accreditation. It's really, what is it that you do and how do you do it? it. I don't think that, I think that sometimes, say smaller organizations that might have less financial resources and less technical savvy, sometimes might be intimidated by approaching accreditation, because it's like, well, we don't really do things in that real sophisticated way. We do use binders. We do use, we do have a shared drive on our computer where our policies and procedures live. Can we get accredited? Absolutely. Because at the end of the day, it's about these systems that you're implementing. It isn't necessarily just about the paper. It's what are you doing and what impact are you having in the lives of the people that you serve. I think that we can sometimes over-engineer systems, where we make we let perfect get in the way of good, and we struggle and we don't actually implement a better idea because we haven't completely bulletproofed it yet. And I always try to encourage organizations to do something, even if it's wrong, and learn from that experience, as opposed to being paralyzed, looking around going, what do I do? Right. So I know that the question that you were asking really had to do around the differences, but it doesn't, whether an organization has a really sophisticated sort of document management solution and is managing, all of their systems with a fine system, such as Simplifyance, or whether they're doing it, sometimes on handwritten pieces of paper and binders. All of that is good as long as the organization is seeking to improve the way that they deliver care over time.
Yeah, no, great. I love that connection, and I love your whole explanation about it, and it makes so much more sense. And everybody needs this, and we've been getting some great interaction here in the comments. So I'm gonna have some questions coming to you that seem really relevant, but we'll go through some of these. Somebody had said, so great to share this perspective of CARF, not a punishment approach, but a focus on increasing quality and safety. Welcome, Michael. Thank you for sharing about CARF. Thank you for your service. And let's get into a couple questions. We got a couple questions here about telehealth IOP services. Does CARF, are you accredit, telehealth IOP services and telehealth in general? Talk about that.
Yeah, no, happy to do that. We actually rewrote standards for 2023 to sort of recognizing the direction that the world went in. We always have had organizations that have used telehealth as a part, and we've had standards for how telehealth would be delivered. But now we actually have pathways for organizations that are completely virtual, that don't have any facilities whatsoever, where all of the services are being delivered online, that they can be accredited and recognized as an accredited organization. We actually had to have some sort of physical facility for an organization before, but we no longer have that. So an organization that is a virtual IOP that is delivering and meeting those services and managing that care over time, as long as they are, satisfying, again, regulatory requirements, because we can't get past that around, licensure and things like that. Absolutely, we have a pathway to accredit that, and we've actually started doing it. I literally, before jumping on here today, I was responding to an email that we had from an organization that was trying to clarify exactly in their virtual space how we were going to look at a couple of different things. So yeah, thanks for that question. We're really excited to be able to do that.
Yeah, and because it's only going to grow, right?
Absolutely.
There's bad things about 2020, but there's good things, right? It really opened up the ability for services like this to reach a broader audience, and kind of took that to happen to get us to here so quickly, right?
Absolutely. Well, and you have places where there's just a dearth of services, and geography was a problem, right? Yes. Geography isn't a problem. People don't have to physically come to you to be able to get access to really high quality, valuable services that helps them to get into recovery. And we should have been taking advantage of this before, but payers.
Yeah, right. All right, let's keep going, because we are getting some good questions here, and again, that's the reason we go live, is because you can get some direct access and ask questions. So Corey asks, how does CARF determine accreditation for a behavioral health provider between, say, a 3-year and 1-year accreditation?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Corey. I want to say about the difference between 3-year and 1-year accreditation is that they're both accredited. So that's the first part, right? Ideally, an organization wants to get a 3-year accreditation because they want to not have to go through the survey process again in a year. But the difference is it's around the amount of conformance to standards. So the way that we define it is that there is, for a 3-year accreditation, there is substantial conformance to the standards, and the level of quality that's being delivered by the organization is reflected in good services that are safe in a healthy and safe environment, and people are achieving positive outcomes. In a 1-year accredited organization, oftentimes that second part is there, where there's good services where the people are benefiting, but there are significant areas of nonconformance to the standards. So this is an opportunity for the organization to strengthen and focus on those areas while continuing to deliver, the healthy and good services that they're delivering, with the idea that they get more substantially in conformance. So it's not a pure algorithm. There's a little bit of an art to it, but we do have over 50 years of doing this. We have data models that will show us when an organization looks like a 1-year versus a 3-year. But really it has to do with kind of major gaps that the organization was unprepared for in that survey process.
Great answer. Thanks for the question, Corey. So we've got another question. ASAM is going to publish their 4th edition. Can you share the relationship between CARF and ASAM?
Yeah. So, and we've been talking about accreditation this, today, but CARF also does do level of care certification on behalf of ASAM. So, really, this is checking fidelity to the ASAM criteria, and we do this. Although we're the vehicle, and we ultimately are making the outcome decision about whether an organization is certified or not. They really aren't our standards per se. They're a collaborative thing between ASAM and CARF that is reflective of their quality. And so the question was around the 4th edition. Yeah, when the 4th edition gets published later this year, we're going to have to go back in and look at the certification elements that we have to make modifications to be more reflective of the changes. I actually got an advanced copy of the ASAM criteria, and so that's going to be part of my job this summer, is to kind of read through that and begin to sketch out what that's going to mean in terms of the changes to the certification elements, and we'll probably have that available in terms of being to market sometime in 2024.
Yeah, great answer. I love that. And yeah, knowing that those things are happening, and you'll have a great summer getting deep into that, man. As a creative, that makes the hair on my skin rise, but
I'll take all the help I can get, Dan.
Yeah, so thanks for the questions. Keep them coming if things keep popping up. But let's talk a little bit about the future, right? So where is CARF headed? How do you see the future in behavioral health and accreditation? Give us an idea of what's coming in the future, how you see things evolving.
Yeah, it's hard to look too far out. I mean, one of the things that, from a behavioral health perspective, the other big project that I'm working on is a CCBHC certification program that's going to be sort of connected, to CARF either through accreditation or it can be freestanding. But the federal government has been working really hard trying to direct money to states into more comprehensive certified community behavioral health clinics that are delivering a full range of services and actually are better funded than they have historically. And Congress has been pretty supportive of that. There's a lot of money going in that direction. So, I do think that there is going to be good opportunities in behavioral health for continued growth and hopefully greater integration with the rest of the healthcare ecosystem, with better care coordination and collaboration between primary care and behavioral health entities. We have been, even though CARF has been in business for 57 years now, it wasn't CARF didn't start as a behavioral health accreditor. We started in more primary healthcare and medical rehab, and behavioral health came around in the 80s when CARF started accrediting behavioral health. But behavioral health is the market leader for CARF at this point. So even though we accredit in 5 different distinct domains, behavioral health is the largest, and in fact represents a little bit more than 50% of all of CARF's business. So the other 4 are sharing the other half of CARF's business. So it has been on a pretty significant growth path. I do think that there are a lot of organizations that are going to have to make decisions about where do they fit, as payment methodologies continue to evolve, and where does accreditation, sit in their priorities. But as far as like massive changes in the space, I think that the thing that I think about a lot is, how do we get that tighter integration with healthcare, and where is that opportunity, and what does that mean for CARF in terms of, do we have to seek a partner perhaps that's going to help us to be able to cross that threshold between primary care delivery and behavioral health. I don't think that they're going to be fully integrated. That's going to make sense for us to be able to cross that Rubicon into more full healthcare accreditation. But I think we need to find pathways to be able to create tighter integration and hopefully synergy for the people that are being served, to be able to get whole healthcare in one place, as opposed to having to have different providers that are meeting all of these distinctive needs that an individual has.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Yeah, and Gina, who I know you know, says, thanks, Michael, for taking time to talk about CARF. I've always enjoyed seeing you at conferences and connecting about the value of CARF and accreditation.
Thanks, Gina.
So let's talk about, when we had talked, it's kind of the pre-interview, you had said something around that measuring performance and outcomes is where people are not meeting CARF standards. Do you want to share a little bit more about that?
Sure. So we have a section of standards that is called Performance Measurement and Management and Performance Improvement. And it is where organizations are intentionally identifying kind of what are the outcomes based on certain domains that we prescribe. So we prescribe that organizations need to measure their performance in effectiveness, efficiency, satisfaction, and access. So they need to set performance targets, and these are clinical activity targets. They need to be collecting data based on what they're based on what that target is, analyzing those results, and then using those results for performance improvement. So let's say that you set a threshold of you wanted to achieve, and I'm just going to say in the real abstract that you were seeking 60% of something, and when you studied it, you only got to 50%. And so what you might do is next year say, well, we still think 60% is the appropriate target. And here's the things that we're going to do. We're going to do this training. We're going to change this form. We're going to change this process to try to, make it better, to try to get to that target. Obviously, I'm talking about this in very abstract terms, but they're part of the reason for that is that across the behavioral health space, there's a whole lot of different things that people might be measuring in those different domains. But the key is that, and one of the key challenges in behavioral health, unlike primary care, is that what we should be measuring and how we should be measuring it is not as clear. You can turn on your television and you can see a commercial for a drug that says that if you take this drug, it's going to, 80% of patients had an A1C less than 7. So it's really easy to know what that measure should be. But it's harder to measure improvement in people's, overall role functioning, reduction in certain symptoms, and there's not necessarily agreement about what all of those, what all of that should look like. So that's one of the challenges that we have in the behavioral health space, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be seeking to learn what we can learn from our patients, determine based on what the purposes of our program, how we should be measuring success to be able to use that both for getting better and then ultimately to tout to people, because in our pre-discussion, Danny, you were talking about stigma, right? And stigma is something that overlays over our industry pretty significantly. But if we can talk about what people can expect to achieve from care, what typically happens to somebody, how many people stop using substances or have a significant reduction in the use of substances, return to work, have significant reconnection with families. Like, these are things that will resonate with an individual who is sitting there saying, here's everything that's going wrong in my life. I want help in all of these areas. And we say, well, our experience tells us that this is what the outcomes typically are, and here's how we achieve them. That's going to help get somebody into care that otherwise might think that they're a lost cause. And so we want to help organizations to have structure, to be able to show what's going to happen to somebody like me if I come into care. And then ultimately, I think the bigger thing is that, to some degree, behavioral health has been sheltered from some of the advanced purchasing methodologies from payers like value-based purchasing. There's still a lot of fee-for-service that goes in our space. If you can't really measure care and articulate the outcomes within the population that you serve, you could get pretty severely damaged financially if you don't know what you're signing up for. And so we hope that organizations can start to more exquisitely measure their performance and know what are the results that they get with the populations that they serve.
Yeah, no, great explanation. And it's good to hear. Yeah, I mean, we know that's going to have a direct reflection on just about everything. And we've touched on that multiple times today. So I hope you guys are listening out there, right? So let's talk about just quickly the role that Simplifyance plays from a software perspective in this, whole ecosystem of what they do. And from your perspective, what do you see the benefits of a software tool like Simplifyance, who really was built to make sure that these things are happening as well? Do you see it as kind of a key part of the ecosystem?
I mean, I think it's a terrific tool for an organization to implement, right? We often use like old tools and old methodology, like even your policy and procedure manual in organization. This department has the old policy and this one has the current policy, and we're not keeping everything up to date, and we're not sharing the same documents and all of that sort of stuff. There's an awful lot of things that, and I mean, I'm sure there are some people who might feel like what we're asking to look at is too much. We kind of think about it more in the Goldilocks, that it's kind of just right. It's just the right amount of things that we're supposed to look at. But any way that an organization can have all of those materials aggregated, maintained, and that everyone's using that same source, and then that is also the same source for a survey team to be able to look at, and then the organization can sort of crosswalk to our standards to be able to prove that they are satisfying our requirements, is always going to do better than those that have it in a much less organized way. I think the other thing is that, between not just even from the software, but I know that Simplifyance has a lot of energy around trying to offer consultation and training for organizations to get better, in a variety of different areas that are important along that sort of compliance continuum. So I think that, we sometimes bury our head in the sand a little bit about some of those requirements because we're focused on a lot of the day-to-day, but this can be a way to be more effective at accomplishing all of those documentary business requirements in a way that is manageable and that you can kind of see those results, particularly if you're sitting in the C-suite in a larger organization where you delegated responsibility, but you're not actually able to easily access those results on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, really great explanation on that as well, man. I mean, so today has been a fantastic interview. I think we've run out of questions. Let me double check the audience. Yeah, we've run out of questions. So kind of any final thoughts, anything you want to make sure people know about CARF or you or the future, anything you think we didn't really touch on today, Michael?
Not really, but I will emphasize, that title again, right? That I hope that one of the things that folks are hearing is this isn't, being accredited isn't something that you prepare for every 3 years. It's a culture that you implement in the organization on an ongoing way that is providing reassurance to you to potentially your board if you're a not-for-profit organization, and then ultimately to the people that you serve, that you are a serious business that is seeking to be a learning entity that is going to get better year over year. And that's the process part, not just the event of the survey.
I love it. And because I put it out there that we were wrapping up, obviously we get a last minute question that we have time for, right?
No problem.
Says, late to join. My apologies, has already been covered, but can you speak to the types of data that needs to be collected 6 months of data prior to the survey happening?
Yeah, so we have an accreditation condition that sometimes people read a lot into what that means. The organization needs to demonstrate conformance to, substantial conformance to the standards. And the thing that we expect is that the organization has been in operation and has been delivering services for 6 months prior to a survey. But it doesn't mean that they have to have done everything, right? And that they can't keep working towards their implementation of policies and procedures and data collection and all that sort of stuff. So it's really just ensuring that you've been in business and that you mostly have been satisfying the standards. So when you're thinking about data that you're collecting, again, if you've got performance targets, you should be collecting data and beginning to analyze at least those early results. That's telling you if you're sort of on target for what you're expecting to achieve in your outcomes, or if you're falling short, what are the things why do you think that you're falling short, and how can you implement new activities designed to help you to get there? So, I want to put a plug in for our resource specialists at CARF that, anytime there's a question that you have, particularly about, these sorts of technical things that are related to conditions or policies and procedures that CARF has, just call us. We will, happily, give you the information and provide you the best possible guidance to ensure your success. Because, I always tell people, we're in the business of helping you to be successful, not to be a barrier to your success.
Yeah, and that's the messaging I've heard this entire interview, Michael. Really, really such a much softer approach to a partner approach that you guys are really in on this process of not only just making sure organizations are wanting to grow and improve and measure themselves on other organizations, but again, helping break stigma, helping more people get successful outcomes, and ensuring organizations are really operating at high levels of standards to ensure that these are met. So that's definitely what I heard from you this entire time, is this partner relationship between CARF and the organizations that they want to really offer accreditation to. So thanks again. I know we're gonna probably want to have you back at some point. I told you we might give it 6 months or a year for you to come back, but if we end up getting a lot of comments or people are like, oh, this was so good, I'd love to hear him talk about that. Well, audience, we will listen to you if you will throw anything in the comment or send us any private messages at Simplifyance on topics that are important to you that you'd love to hear about around compliance in general. So Michael, again, thanks for your time today. Really appreciate all your insight and knowledge and really just the value you brought today.
Well, thanks, Danny. I appreciate the opportunity. Take care.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye.